Hi, my name is Craig Fashaw, and I'm the worship director and creative director here at Grace Point Church, Cincinnati. I went to Urshan College for 2 years, and I'm originally from West Palm Beach, Florida. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of learning how to lead yourself into worship. In Matthew chapter 2, the wise men, they went and they found Jesus. And the Bible says that they fell down and worshiped Jesus, and they offered him gold and frankincense and myrrh. And one of the most interesting things about that story for me is the fact that there was no praise team in the room. There was no worship leader in the room. There was no keyboard. There was no grand piano. There was no electric guitar 1 and electric guitar 2. There was no click and track. There was nothing that was leading them into worship. But the Bible says that when they saw Jesus being born, they fell down and worshiped him, and they offered him things. I think that's interesting to note, because when the wise men were found in the presence of Jesus, they didn't just stand and observe, and they weren't just in awe of what God was doing. They participated, and they gave something. They did something. Charity Gale said at Heart of Worship 2019, she said, so many times we will look at something from another church, or we will see somebody doing something, and we will long for that to happen in our church. For example, we will long for somebody to be on their knees on the platform and with a mic in their hand and be worshiping, or something. You wish people in your church would dance, or you wish people in your church would clap. And she was saying, we long for these things. We wish, we want. But she said, instead of thinking of it that way, instead of thinking of things in a we wish mindset, she said, be the change that you want to see. She said, if you want to see somebody dance in the altar, then you, as a worship leader, as a worshiper, you dance in the altar. You clap your hands. You jump. You dance. You shout. You do those things, because when you start to do those things, it produces a culture in your church. But none of these things can happen if we don't first learn how to lead ourselves into worship. One of my favorite things to do is when no one else is watching, when no one else is listening, I like to worship God on my own time. I learn how to cry with the Lord. I learn how to dance. I learn how to clap when no one else is in the room, because I learn how to lead myself into worship, so that when I go to other places and when I do other things, it's not so hard to get in the mode of worship, because I know how to worship when no one else is watching, because worship is all about him anyways. The Bible says in 2 Samuel chapter 6, when the ark was brought into Jerusalem, that David danced before the Lord. Then the Bible also says that Michal, from a window far away, looked down on David, and she despised David. So 2 things to note here. First, when David danced, it was before the Lord. It wasn't for a congregation. It wasn't for a people. It wasn't to puff them up. It wasn't to be their cheerleader. It was so that David could dance before the Lord. That's the first thing. And the second thing that we see is there's a spectator. There's somebody else looking from the outside in, and they see this worshiper dancing before the Lord, and they despise this worshiper. Now, I'm not really sure why she despised him, but that's not the point. The point is that she was a spectator, and she was looking from the outside in, and she wasn't participating herself. There's a part of me that thinks that if she was participating herself and she was involved in that she wouldn't have been so concerned with what David was doing. I tell my team all the time to learn how to worship more than anything else. We have practiced all that we can practice. We have rehearsed all that we can rehearse. We have gone over parts. We have gone over sequences. But more than anything else, learn how to worship. Just be a worshiper. More than anything else, lead yourself into worship. I've been in places where there's only 2 people in the room that you're leading worship for, and I've been in places where there's 2,000 people that you're leading in worship. And one of the coolest things that I've learned in all of those venues and being a part of different events, what I've learned is that I can worship God the same way that I would worship in front of 2 people and in front of 2,000 people, because I have learned to lead myself into worship before anybody else. I tell my team all the time, if you can't lead yourself into worship, you will lead no one into worship. So I encourage you today, worship leader to worship leader, worshiper to worshiper, just learn, if you learn one thing, learn how to lead yourself into worship. When no one else is in the room, get in that place where you worship God. The wise men, they fell down and they worshiped. David danced and he worshiped. So I encourage you, when the song says clap, clap. When the song says jump, make sure you jump. When the song says shout, as a worshiper, make sure you outwardly express to shout. Make sure you do those things because you're a physical representation of the song. And if you, as a worship leader, don't do those things, don't do those actions, then no one else in the congregation will. Instead of pointing at somebody else and saying, I wish they would do this, and I wish they would worship, and I wish they would lift their hands, you be the change and you start to worship. If you do those things, if you start to worship, it'll be a chain reaction in your church, and God will do something great in your church. I encourage you today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your life to be a worshiper. Do something. This is the Vertical Worship Community. I'm thankful that you tuned in today. Make sure to subscribe and we'll see you soon. God bless.